Welcome to tonight's sleep story. Take a deep breath, close your eyes, and let go of the day. Allow yourself to relax and settle into a peaceful state as my voice gently guides you through a world of calm and tranquility. With each word, feel the tension slip away, leaving only relaxation and comfort. Let's drift into a soothing story together as you begin your journey into a restful and rejuvenating sleep. In a land blanketed by an endless winter, where the cold winds howled and snowflakes danced endlessly in the air, there stood a towering structure, the Glass Mountain. It was a mountain unlike any other, its sharp peaks glittering under the pale light of the sun, reflecting like an icy mirror. The mountain had become the symbol of impossible dreams, for it held the greatest of mysteries. At its summit, a beautiful princess was said to be trapped. No one knew how she had come to be there, or who had cursed her to remain locked away in this frozen prison for so long. But one thing was certain, no one had ever reached her. The kingdom below, though alive in spirit, was heavy with the sorrow of this endless winter. The people had grown used to the cold, their faces hardened by the biting winds, their hearts yearning for the warmth that seemed so far out of reach. The harsh weather had taken its toll on the village, and the people often huddled inside, seeking warmth and comfort wherever they could. But the princess, hidden away on the mountain's peak, remained an enduring symbol of both hope and despair. She was unreachable, a distant figure whose very presence seemed to represent the unattainable, a dream just beyond grasp. Among the people who dreamed of reaching the princess was a young boy named Jamie. Unlike the other villagers who had resigned themselves to their lives in the cold, Jamie was different. His heart burned with the desire to prove that the impossible could be done, that the mountain could be scaled, and that the princess could be freed. He was a child of boundless energy and curiosity, always asking questions and seeking new challenges. The stories of failed suitors who had tried to climb the Glass Mountain and failed never deterred him. Instead, they fueled his determination to do what no one else could. Jamie would often find himself standing at the edge of the village, gazing up at the towering mountain, his mind full of wonder and plans. The winter winds would ruffle his hair, and he would feel the cold bite at his cheeks, but he wasn't fazed. He knew the task would be difficult. He knew the mountain was steep and treacherous. But Jamie was not like the other suitors. He was a dreamer, and to him the impossible was just another puzzle waiting to be solved. One evening, as the sun set behind the peaks of the Glass Mountain, casting long shadows over the frozen valley, Jamie stood alone looking up at the summit. The mountain sparkled with the fading light of day. But to him, it was more than just a cold, icy spire. It was a challenge, a mystery to be unraveled. And in that moment, Jamie made a decision. He would be the one to scale the mountain. He would be the one to free the princess, to break the curse that had bound her for so long. And with that resolve, the adventure of a lifetime began. The first steps Jamie took toward the Glass Mountain were filled with both excitement and uncertainty. As he looked back at the village one last time, the snow-covered roofs and the distant lights of the houses felt like a world he was leaving behind. A world that seemed small and distant now, as he was about to embark on a journey that would take him beyond the limits of what anyone thought possible. His breath came out in visible puffs, the cold air biting at his skin, but the weight of the freezing winds didn't faze him. His heart was alight with anticipation. Jamie had been preparing for this journey for weeks, and he was confident he had the tools to succeed. His ice skates, which had always been his companion during winter play, now served as his means of progress, allowing him to move swiftly over the frozen ground without slipping. The village's elders had warned him of the dangerous birds that guarded the mountain and the treacherous ice that formed at the peak. But Jamie's resolve was unwavering. Unlike the many who had tried before, he had a plan that seemed foolproof. The ice skates would be his ticket to making it up the slick, smooth surfaces of the mountain. He would stay anchored to the ice as he ascended, skating when he could and using his wits when he couldn't. As he made his way closer to the base of the mountain, the landscape grew more desolate. The tall trees that once lined the edge of the village were now nothing more than skeletal figures, their branches clawing at the sky like the bones of forgotten giants. The wind howled through the barren landscape, and Jamie's footsteps echoed in the silence, each crunch of his boots against the snow seeming to reverberate in the emptiness. But he didn't let the isolation scare him. Instead, he focused on the task ahead. The path to the summit was not an easy one, but it was one he was determined to conquer. The glass mountain loomed ahead, its icy surface glistening in the pale sunlight. The mountain was imposing, its slopes slick with a coat of frozen rain, and the jagged peaks seemed to pierce the sky itself. The sight of it only fueled Jamie's determination. This was it, the place where countless others had failed, where the curse had trapped the princess for years. But Jamie refused to be deterred. He saw the mountain not as an insurmountable obstacle, but as a challenge, one that was simply waiting for someone brave enough to face it head-on. He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath, feeling the crisp air fill his lungs. His hands were trembling, but not from fear. He was shaking with anticipation. He pulled his scarf tighter around his neck and tightened his gloves, securing his ice skates in place. It was time to begin his climb, to take the first step toward the impossible. Jamie didn't look back. He knew there was no turning around now. Every step forward brought him closer to the summit, to the princess, and to the dream he had carried with him for so long. As he began his ascent, the mountain seemed to rise up to meet him. The wind whispered in his ears, carrying with it the faintest traces of something ancient and untold. Jamie's heart raced as he set foot on the icy path. The first few steps were tentative, but as he gained confidence, he moved faster, gliding across the frozen surface. The skates gave him an unexpected grace, allowing him to slide over the smooth ice with surprising ease. The higher he went, the colder it became, the air growing thin, but Jamie didn't falter. The mountain was no longer just an obstacle. It had become his companion, pushing him to prove his worth. As Jamie continued his climb, the cold seemed to wrap around him like a cloak, more intense with each step. His breath came out in foggy clouds, the freezing air biting at his cheeks and nose, but he barely noticed it. His focus was entirely on the path ahead, on the seemingly endless ascent that stretched before him. His ice skates helped him maintain his footing, gliding smoothly over the ice with every push. The mountain seemed to shift beneath him, as if it were alive, watching, testing him to see if he had the strength to conquer its heights. The first challenge came when Jamie reached a section of the mountain where the ice was slick and uneven. The skates, which had been a source of support, now felt less reliable. The ground was unpredictable, and he had to rely on his balance and quick thinking to avoid slipping. Jamie paused for a moment, looking at the jagged ice around him. It felt as if the mountain were alive, daring him to continue, to prove his worth. For a brief moment, doubt crept into his mind. Was he truly capable of doing what no one else had been able to? Could he really reach the summit? But as quickly as the doubt came, he shook it off. The thought of the princess, trapped on top of the mountain for years, filled him with renewed determination. He couldn't stop now, not when he had come so far. Jamie took a deep breath, gathering his strength, and with a determined push, he continued. The skates were once again his allies, helping him slide over the tricky ice with careful precision. As he climbed higher, the mountain grew steeper, and the winds grew colder and more biting. The gusts whipped through his hair and lashed against his face like icy needles. But Jamie pressed on. The icy air felt sharp against his skin, the cold like a constant reminder of the mountain's challenge. But he was undeterred. His heart was strong, and his resolve even stronger. He knew the climb would test him physically and mentally, but with each step, he felt a sense of power growing within him. The mountain was no longer just an obstacle, it was a test, a proving ground where only the determined could succeed. As the climb grew steeper, the path narrowed, and Jamie had to be more careful with each step. The ice beneath him was thinner in places, and he had to carefully balance himself to avoid falling. But with each movement, he felt his confidence grow. The higher he went, the more the world around him faded, and he was left with only the sound of his breath and the steady rhythm of his movements. The mountain was silent now, its cold beauty surrounding him, almost as if it had surrendered, acknowledging his determination. The guardian bird, a creature of legend, was said to watch over the mountain and prevent any who dared to climb from succeeding. But as Jamie continued to ascend, the bird's presence, though palpable, was not immediate. The silence of the mountain was both eerie and comforting. He could feel its eyes upon him, waiting for the moment when he would falter. But Jamie refused to give in to fear. The higher he climbed, the stronger he became, his resolve as firm as the ice beneath him. The bird might have been watching, but Jamie was determined to show that no guardian could prevent him from achieving his dreams. As Jamie climbed higher, the world around him seemed to transform. The winds, once harsh and biting, had softened, and the air grew colder, yet thinner, with each passing step. The atmosphere shifted from one of tense anticipation to quiet serenity. The path ahead, though still steep, became more familiar to him, as if the mountain itself was guiding him towards something greater. The higher he climbed, the less he could hear from the world below. The village, the noise of the wind, the hustle and bustle of life, everything seemed to fade into a distant memory, as though he was no longer a part of it. The silence was broken only by the occasional crunch of ice beneath his skates and the whisper of the cold wind as it slipped past his ears. Jamie looked up, his gaze catching the jagged peaks of the mountain above him. The summit, still far out of reach, glistened in the pale light, almost as if mocking him with its unyielding beauty. But instead of feeling discouraged, Jamie was invigorated. There was something magical about this place, something that stirred a sense of awe and determination in his heart. With each step, the mountain seemed to become more than just an obstacle. It was now a challenge he was meant to face. The climb had become a meditation of sorts, each movement bringing him closer not just to the summit, but to a deeper understanding of himself. His muscles burned with exertion, his body pushed to its limits by the harsh conditions, yet with every breath, Jamie felt a sense of peace wash over him. It was as though the mountain had stripped away all the distractions, all the noise of life, and had left him with only the purest version of himself. No longer was he climbing for the princess alone. Now he was climbing for the freedom he had always sought. Freedom from the mundane, from the doubts that once clouded his mind, and from the expectations placed upon him. This journey had become more than a quest to save a princess. It had become a journey to save himself. Despite the calm that surrounded him, Jamie couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for him at the peak. He could almost sense the presence of the guardian bird, its eyes following his every move. It was a creature of legend, feared by all who had attempted the climb before him. The bird was said to be as fierce as the mountain itself, guarding the summit with a ferocity that few could withstand. But Jamie was not afraid. The mountain had already taught him that fear could be conquered by resolve, and his resolve was stronger than ever. His legs grew tired, his muscles aching from the effort, but Jamie knew he was close. The summit was within reach, the reward only a few more steps away, and as he neared the top, the air grew colder still, but something else began to fill the space, the faintest sound, like the rustling of feathers. Jamie froze for a moment, a sense of unease creeping into his chest. He had heard stories of the bird, but nothing had prepared him for the actual presence of it. But as quickly as the sensation came, Jamie dismissed it. There would be no turning back now. The princess, the mountain, the challenge, everything was within his grasp. It was time to face whatever came next. As Jamie reached the final stretch of the climb, the air around him grew colder, and the mountain's surface became steeper, almost vertical in some places. The path had become narrow, the icy walls towering on either side of him, forcing him to edge along the ledge with nothing but the grip of his skates to keep him steady. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of the challenge. Every muscle in his body screamed with exertion, but Jamie didn't pause. He had come too far, and the summit, now within sight, called to him with a magnetic pull. The mountain, which had once seemed so impossible, now felt like a familiar companion. Each step forward was both an achievement and a confirmation of his strength, his perseverance. The climb had tested him physically, mentally, and emotionally, but with every challenge, Jamie had learned more about himself, more about the deep reserves of strength he had never known he possessed. The mountain was no longer just a physical barrier, it had become a reflection of his own growth. As Jamie reached the final ledge before the summit, he paused for a moment, looking out over the frozen landscape below. The view was breathtaking, but his gaze was fixed on the peak that lay just ahead. The summit was now within reach, a few more steps, and he would have conquered what no one else had ever dared to attempt. But as he stepped forward, something shifted in the air. A subtle change that sent a ripple of unease through him. He could feel it now, the presence of the guardian bird. The wind picked up, howling in his ears as if the mountain itself were warning him of the final trial. Jamie's breath caught in his throat, his instincts screaming at him to pause, to be ready. He knew the bird was near, but he refused to let it stop him. The bird appeared in the distance, its massive wings slicing through the icy air. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying, a creature of legend, fierce and untouchable. It circled above him, watching, waiting for the moment when he would falter. But Jamie was not afraid. He had faced the mountain, the cold, the isolation, and now he would face this last challenge. With a deep breath, he pushed forward, his skates gliding effortlessly over the icy path. The bird swooped down, its talons gleaming like sharp knives, but Jamie didn't flinch. With a swift movement, he ducked, using the ice skates to propel himself out of harm's way. The bird let out a shriek, circling back above him, its wings spread wide in a powerful display of strength. But Jamie was determined. He had come this far, and he would not be stopped. With one final burst of energy, he made his way to the summit, the bird retreating into the sky as if it had accepted his resolve. As Jamie reached the top, the wind seemed to quiet, and for the first time in his life, he felt a sense of complete peace. The mountain, once a symbol of the impossible, was now a testament to his own strength and determination. And there, standing at the peak, was the princess. She was as beautiful as the stories had promised, but there was something else in her eyes, something that Jamie had not expected. It was gratitude, not just for him, but for the journey he had taken to reach her. She had watched the many suitors before him fail, but Jamie had succeeded where they had not because of strength alone, but because of the heart that guided his every move. As he approached her, Jamie's heart swelled with a sense of accomplishment, but also with a newfound understanding. The true treasure was not the princess, but the journey itself, the trials that had shaped him, and the person he had become along the way. As Jamie stood atop the glass mountain, gazing out over the kingdom that stretched below him, a deep sense of calm washed over him. The winds, which had whipped violently around him throughout his journey, now seemed to settle, the stillness surrounding him almost sacred. The mountain, once so menacing and insurmountable, now appeared peaceful, as if it too recognized his triumph. With each slow breath, Jamie felt the weight of the journey settle in his chest. But it wasn't a burden. It was a sense of fulfillment, a quiet pride that filled him from within. The princess standing before him was a vision of grace and beauty. But there was something more in her eyes, something that Jamie had not anticipated. It wasn't just gratitude, although that was certainly there. It was the recognition of his journey, of the courage it took to face the trials of the mountain, and the understanding that what he had done was not simply to rescue her, but to reclaim something far deeper. "You've done it," she said softly, her voice as gentle as the wind that now surrounded them. "You've reached the summit, but more than that, you've proven something to yourself, that you are stronger than you think." Jamie blinked, surprised by the depth of her words. He had expected to be congratulated, perhaps praised for his strength and determination, but her words carried a weight far beyond simple gratitude. The mountain had tested him in ways he hadn't fully understood at the time, but now, standing at the top with the princess, he realized the truth. The real victory wasn't in reaching the summit, but in discovering who he had become along the way. The princess continued, her gaze soft yet intense. "The curse that held me here for so long wasn't just the work of the sorcerer. It was the belief that no one could reach me, that the mountain was too high, too treacherous, too impossible to conquer. But you have proven otherwise. You have shown that the impossible can be done, not through sheer strength alone, but through heart, through will, and through belief." Jamie stood there, absorbing her words, feeling as though the weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders. For so long he had been driven by the desire to prove that he could accomplish the impossible. But now, as the winds calmed and the mountains stood silently behind him, Jamie understood. The climb had been a journey to discover his own strength, his own resilience, and his own capacity to overcome. "You are free," Jamie said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "The curse is broken, and you can return to your kingdom." But the princess smiled, a soft, knowing smile that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom within it. "Yes, but the curse wasn't only mine to bear. The kingdom too was trapped in the grip of this eternal winter, just as I was. Now that you have broken the curse, the land will begin to thaw. It was your journey that freed both me and this kingdom, Jamie." You didn't just climb a mountain, you set a people free." Jamie's heart swelled with a sense of pride, but also with a quiet understanding. The journey was not just about the princess, not just about the mountain. It was about the strength of the human spirit to rise above challenges and to embrace the unknown. The climb had been difficult, but it had revealed something Jamie had not expected to find. It was not the princess that mattered most in this story. It was the journey, the tests, and the growth that mattered. As the princess walked toward him, her steps light and graceful, the air around them seemed to shift. The cold that had once pervaded the kingdom was beginning to fade, replaced by a warmth that spread slowly, like the first rays of sun after a long, harsh winter. The clouds that had shrouded the mountain were parting, revealing a sky that was no longer dark and oppressive, but full of light and possibility. Jamie felt the warmth of the sun on his skin, and for the first time in his life, he felt truly alive. The mountain behind him was no longer an obstacle. It was a symbol of all he had overcome, and as the princess stood beside him, her hand gently resting on his shoulder, Jamie realized that he had done more than climb a mountain. He had changed the course of his own destiny. As the warmth of the sun spread across the mountain peak, Jamie stood in awe, his heart filled with a sense of peace that he had never known before. The princess beside him seemed to glow in the soft light, her presence now more than just a symbol of something distant and unattainable. She was real, her smile genuine, and her eyes held a depth of gratitude that Jamie had not expected. There was something calming in the way she looked at him, as though her freedom and the freedom of the kingdom were now intertwined with his own. The wind, which had once been a cold, biting force, had softened into a gentle breeze that caressed their faces. The mountainside, once jagged and icy, now seemed to shimmer with new life. The snow had begun to melt, trickling down the sides of the mountain like streams of water rushing toward the valleys below. It was as if the entire landscape was waking up, stretching its arms after a long, cold slumber. The flowers that had been dormant beneath the ice were now beginning to bloom, their colors vibrant against the pale backdrop of the mountain. The world, once frozen and still, was now alive with possibility. As Jamie took in the sight of the changing world around him, the princess stepped closer, her voice soft but filled with authority. "You've done it, Jamie. You've broken the curse. The kingdom will be free again, just as you are now free to choose your path." Her words struck a chord deep within him, and for the first time Jamie realized that the journey had never been about reaching the top of the mountain or rescuing a princess. It had always been about discovering who he was and what he was capable of. The mountain had tested him just as the cold had tested him, and each trial had revealed something new. But now, standing at the summit with the princess, Jamie understood that it was not the challenges that defined him. It was the way he had risen to meet them, the way he had refused to give up even when the path seemed impossible. The princess smiled and her hand brushed gently against his, offering him a gesture of comfort and understanding. "You are the one who broke the curse, Jamie, not just with your strength, but with your heart. You believed in something that no one else thought possible, and now you have shown the world that anything is achievable, even the most impossible dreams." Jamie looked out over the vast kingdom below him. The once darkened land, covered in a perpetual winter, was beginning to thaw. The trees that had been barren for so long were now showing signs of life, their branches stirring in the breeze, a sign that the cold grip of winter was finally loosening. The village in the distance was no longer shrouded in frost, but bathed in sunlight. People would soon emerge from their homes, feeling the warmth of the sun on their faces and the promise of a new beginning in the air. The impossible had been achieved, and the kingdom would flourish once again. But For Jamie, the true victory was not just the freedom of the princess or the thawing of the land. It was the knowledge that he had been capable of something greater than he had ever imagined. He had faced the mountain, the bird, and the unknown, and he had emerged victorious. His journey had transformed him, and now, standing at the peak, he understood the lesson that the mountain had taught him, that courage, perseverance, and belief in oneself could overcome any challenge, no matter how insurmountable it seemed. Jamie turned to the princess, who had watched him in quiet admiration. "What now?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. "What happens after the curse is broken?" The princess smiled warmly, her eyes sparkling with the same hope that Jamie now felt in his heart. "Now you have the chance to choose your future," she said. "The mountain is behind you, and the world before you is yours to explore. The journey you've taken has made you who you are, and now it's time for you to live the life you've always dreamed of." And with that, Jamie felt a sense of peace and freedom that was beyond anything he had ever known. The mountain, the cold, the curse, they were all behind him now, and in front of him lay a world full of possibilities, a world that he could shape with his own hands. As the sun set behind the peaks, casting a warm glow over the landscape, Jamie knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one where he could live without fear and with the knowledge that he was capable of achieving anything. As Jamie stood in the warm glow of the setting sun, the world around him seemed to settle into a peaceful rhythm. The mountain, once an imposing giant in the distance, now felt like a distant memory. The challenges that had tested him, each grueling step, the fierce winds, the bitter cold, were no longer present. What remained was a sense of quiet triumph, a feeling of completeness that had eluded him for so long. The princess standing beside him seemed to share in his peace. Her presence had always been a symbol of hope, of the kingdom's frozen state, and now, with the curse lifted, she was free to live as she had always dreamed. The weight of the centuries-old spell was gone, but Jamie saw something more in her eyes. A new light, one that reflected not just gratitude, but a deep sense of relief and possibility. "You did it," she said again, this time with a softness that Jamie had not expected. There was no grand celebration in her words, no exultation, just a quiet acknowledgement of the journey they had both undertaken, the sacrifices made, and the shared understanding of what had been achieved. Jamie nodded, but he did not speak. His heart swelled with emotion, but it wasn't for the princess or the kingdom. It was for himself. The journey had given him more than just the freedom of the princess or the lifting of the curse. It had given him the freedom to define his own path, to become the person he had always hoped to be. With a deep, steadying breath, Jamie turned his gaze back to the kingdom. The once frigid landscape was now alive with color. The trees were budding with new leaves, flowers were blooming in vibrant hues, and the village in the distance, once trapped in an eternal winter, was now bathed in the soft light of a warm spring. It was as if the entire world had been reborn, just as he had been. "There's so much more to see," Jamie said, his voice filled with wonder and anticipation. He wasn't speaking to the princess, nor was he speaking to anyone else. His words were a reflection of his heart, an expression of the possibilities that lay ahead. The mountain had been conquered, the curse had been broken, but Jamie now understood that his journey was far from over. The world was vast, full of uncharted territory, new adventures, and countless opportunities. The climb had been only one chapter of his life, and as the sun set and the stars began to twinkle above, he realized that the real journey had only just begun. The princess smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. She had always known that Jamie was different from the others, that his determination wasn't driven by a desire for fame or glory, but by something deeper. He had sought to prove not just to her, but to himself that he was capable of more than the world had ever asked of him. "The world is yours to discover," she said, stepping forward and placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "You are free, Jamie, free to choose your own destiny, to chart your own course. What you do next is entirely up to you." And with those words, Jamie felt the weight of the past fade away. The mountain, the trials, the bird, all of it was behind him now. What lay ahead was a future of possibility, of adventures waiting to be experienced, of a life unburdened by the constraints of the past. Jamie turned his face to the sky, letting the breeze brush his cheeks. He felt alive in a way that he had never felt before. The mountain had been a test, but it had also been a gift that had revealed to him a strength he had never known he possessed. And now, with the sun setting behind him, he could finally breathe easy. The journey was over, but the adventure had only just begun. As the soft light of twilight descended upon the landscape, Jamie felt a sense of awe that surpassed even the exhilaration of reaching the summit. The warmth of the day's sun lingered in the air, now cool and comforting against his skin, a gentle reminder that the hardships he had faced were behind him. The princess, now standing beside him, was no longer the distant figure of his quest, but a person, an equal, someone who had shared this journey with him. They were no longer the adventurer and the prize. They were two souls, bound together by the trials of the mountain and the bonds they had forged along the way. Jamie took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill his lungs, the crisp scent of pine mixed with the soft, earthy aroma of the soil below. He looked out over the valley where the first signs of spring were emerging. The once frozen earth was beginning to thaw, giving way to small buds and shoots of green. The snow that had clung to the ground for so long was now retreating, leaving behind a landscape that was alive with the promise of renewal. It struck him then how much the world had changed, not just the kingdom, but the world within himself. He had started this journey with the singular goal of saving the princess, but what he had gained along the way had been far more valuable than he could have ever imagined. He had gained a deeper understanding of his own strength, his capacity to face challenges head-on, and his ability to adapt to whatever life threw his way. The mountain had not only broken the curse on the princess, but had also liberated him from the doubts and insecurities that had long weighed him down. He turned to her, the soft glow of the setting sun casting a warm halo around her. Her eyes met his, and there was an unspoken understanding between them, a recognition of what they had both been through. She had watched him struggle and persevere, and in his eyes, she saw the same strength and resilience that had once carried her through her own trials. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the whisper of the wind. "Not just for rescuing me, but for freeing all of us. You've done more than you could possibly know." Jamie smiled, a quiet, genuine smile that reached his eyes. He had not sought glory, nor had he expected praise. What he had done was simply follow the path that had been laid out before him, trusting in his abilities and his instincts. And now, standing beside the princess at the peak of the world, he understood that the true reward was not in the destination, but in the journey itself. "The kingdom will thrive again," he said softly, "but we mustn't forget the journey that brought us here. We can't take what we've learned and let it slip away. We must carry it with us, always." The princess nodded, her expression softening. She looked out over the vast expanse below them, where the first rays of sunlight had begun to stretch over the horizon. The kingdom was changing, and so were they. There was no longer a need to look back at the hardships or the obstacles they had faced. The future was open before them, full of infinite possibilities. "I think it's time," she said, her voice carrying a quiet sense of resolve. "It's time to let go of the past, to let go of the curses that have kept us trapped for so long. It's time to step forward into something new." Jamie nodded in agreement, feeling a deep sense of peace settle within him. The mountain had given him what he needed. Not just the princess, not just the freedom of the kingdom, but the realization that he was ready to live his life, to chart his own course. The mountain had shown him that nothing was impossible. Not for him, not for anyone. And now, as he stood beside the princess, he knew that he was free to embrace whatever came next. The future, once uncertain and intimidating, now seemed full of promise. Jamie felt a newfound sense of purpose stir within him, a feeling that had been dormant for far too long. The journey was over, but the adventure had only just begun. As the final rays of the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and lavender, Jamie and the princess stood in a shared silence. The quiet was profound, a peace that had settled over them both after a long and tumultuous journey. The mountain, once a symbol of insurmountable challenge, now felt like an old friend, its rugged cliffs softened by the fading light. The land below, bathed in the afterglow of sunset, seemed to pulse with life, a reminder that no journey, no matter how difficult, was ever truly in vain. The princess, who had once been bound by the curse and trapped in a world of icy stillness, now stood beside Jamie, her eyes reflecting the changing world around them. She had watched the world of men and magic unfold before her, and in that moment she too felt the weight of what had been accomplished. No longer a passive figure waiting to be rescued, she had become an equal partner in this journey, sharing in the triumph and in the quiet realization that the journey was about more than just the destination. Jamie took a deep breath, letting the cool mountain air fill his lungs. The smell of fresh earth and the scent of pine needles mingled with the crisp wind, which now carried a trace of spring. As he stood there, absorbing the calm beauty of the moment, he realized that the mountain was more than just a physical challenge. It had been a journey into his own soul. He had ventured into the unknown, tested his limits, and faced his deepest fears, only to emerge stronger, wiser, and more connected to his true self. "Do you ever wonder," the princess asked softly, her voice breaking the silence, "what it all means?" Jamie glanced at her, a soft smile playing at the corners of his lips. "I used to wonder that," he replied, "but now I think I know. The meaning is in the journey itself, in the challenges, the struggles, the moments of doubt, and in the victories, both big and small. It's about what we learn along the way, about who we become in the process." The princess nodded, her gaze still fixed on the distant valley below. "Perhaps that's true for both of us. The curse was not just something that bound me, but something that kept us all from seeing the bigger picture. Now, with the curse broken, I can finally see clearly." Jamie turned to her, his heart swelling with a mixture of admiration and gratitude. "And I see the woman who has fought just as hard as I have," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "The woman who has freed not just herself, but a kingdom." For a long moment they stood side by side, both feeling the weight of what they had achieved. The mountain had been the final trial, the ultimate test, and now, standing on its summit, they were free, free to live, free to love, free to choose their own paths. The princess had found her freedom, but so had Jamie. In his pursuit of a goal that had seemed impossible, he had discovered his true strength. The world stretched out before them, the possibilities endless. There was no need for words. They both knew that what lay ahead was a new beginning. The past, with its hardships and trials, was behind them now, and the future, with all its uncertainty and promise, was before them. The wind had died down and the air had grown still. For a moment, everything seemed to hold its breath, as if the mountain itself was watching, waiting for them to take the first step into their new lives. And in that quiet moment, Jamie realized that he was no longer the same person who had started this journey. He had been transformed, not by the mountain, but by the lessons he had learned along the way, by the woman who had stood beside him, and by the love that had blossomed between them. With a final, lingering look at the kingdom below, Jamie took the princess's hand in his. Together, they turned towards the path that led down the mountain. The sun had set, but the world was still bathed in a soft golden glow. They were ready to face whatever came next, together. As the night settled in, enveloping the mountain in a cloak of deep blue, the world around Jamie and the princess seemed to fall into a serene stillness. The air had turned crisp, and the moon now hung low in the sky, casting a gentle silvery light over the landscape. The stars, once obscured by the mountain's towering presence, now shone brightly, twinkling in a vast expanse of velvet. The world was at peace, as though nature itself was offering its own quiet blessing upon their journey. Jamie and the princess walked side by side, their footsteps soft against the earth, the sound of their movement blending seamlessly with the night's silence. The princess's hand was still in Jamie's, her touch warm and comforting, a steady presence beside him. She was no longer the woman trapped in a curse, nor the helpless figure waiting to be saved. She was his equal now, a partner in this new chapter that was unfolding before them. There was no need for words between them. The bond they shared was unspoken, deeper than any vow or promise could capture. "You know," Jamie said softly, breaking the peaceful silence, "I never imagined that this would be how it would end. I thought the journey was all about the climb, about the goal, about freeing you. But now I realize it was never just about that." The princess looked up at him, her gaze thoughtful, the gentle glow of the moon illuminating her features. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice carrying the quiet strength that had grown within her over the course of their journey. Jamie smiled, a soft, introspective smile. "I thought the mountain would be the final trial, but it wasn't. It was just the beginning. The real challenge was never about overcoming the obstacles on the path. It was about learning to live without fear, about finding strength in what seemed impossible." The princess nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. She too had realized that the journey was not about reaching the summit or breaking the curse. It was about the transformation that happened within them both along the way. She had been freed, yes, but not just from the curse that had bound her. She had been freed from the limitations that had held her back for so long, and now she was ready to live the life she had always imagined. "We've both been freed," she said quietly, her voice filled with the weight of her newfound understanding. "Not just from the past, but from the beliefs that held us in place. We are no longer bound by the expectations of the world or by the curse that held me here. We are free to choose our path now, without looking back." Jamie glanced up at the stars, feeling a sense of wonder at the vastness of the sky. It seemed as though the world was limitless, and for the first time in his life, he felt truly free. The journey had taught him more than he could have ever imagined. It had shown him that strength was not about conquering external obstacles, but about overcoming the doubts and fears within himself. The climb had been physical, yes, But the true challenge had been the emotional and mental obstacles that he had faced along the way. "I've been thinking about what comes next," Jamie said, his voice carrying the weight of his words. "About the life we're going to build, about what it means to be truly free." The princess smiled, the soft light of the moon catching the edges of her hair, making it shimmer like strands of silver. "And what do you want, Jamie?" she asked, her voice gentle but filled with curiosity. "What do you want from this life we've both fought for?" Jamie paused for a moment, taking in the beauty of the world around them. He felt the weight of the question settle into his chest, but instead of fear or uncertainty, he felt a calm clarity. He had always been driven by a desire to prove himself, to conquer the mountain, to free the princess. But now, with that goal accomplished, he realized that what he wanted most of all was peace. He wanted a life filled with meaning, not in the sense of external achievements, but in the simple moments of connection and fulfillment. "I want to live a life that matters," he said, his voice steady. "A life that's not defined by the things I've conquered, but by the people I've loved, the relationships I've built, and the peace I've found within myself." The princess's smile deepened, her eyes softening with understanding. "And I want that too," she said, her voice full of warmth. "To live a life where we are free to be ourselves, to find joy in the small moments, and to build a future that reflects who we truly are." With that, the two of them continued walking, the moonlight casting long shadows on the path ahead. The future was unknown, but for the first time, neither of them felt afraid. They had faced the impossible and come out stronger on the other side. Now they were free to live the life they had always dreamed of together. As they walked down the mountain together, the air grew even cooler, but the sense of peace between them was like a warm blanket, protecting them from the chill of the evening breeze. The world around them seemed to grow quieter as the night settled in, the soft whisper of the wind in the trees becoming a calming lullaby, almost as if the earth itself was welcoming them home. Every step they took down the path was a reminder that they had not only conquered a physical journey, but had also learned to conquer the doubts within themselves. The valley below was bathed in the soft glow of the moon, and the once threatening shadows of the mountain were now nothing more than gentle contours in the distance. The air smelled fresh, rich with the scent of pine and earth, as though the land was renewing itself, just as they had. The world felt more alive than it had ever been, vibrant and full of promise. And in that moment, Jamie realized just how much his life had shifted in such a short time. He had come to the mountain seeking answers, seeking redemption, but he had found something far more precious: inner peace and the courage to face whatever would come next. The princess walking by his side was no longer the image of someone saved or rescued. She was no longer the damsel in distress, nor the distant figure who represented everything Jamie thought he wanted. She was a partner, an equal, and in her he saw not just a woman freed from a curse, but a person who had been shaped by the same struggles that had shaped him. Her presence now felt like a reflection of the transformation they had both undergone. "You know," Jamie said after a while, his voice low and reflective, "I never realized how much I needed this, how much I needed to stop chasing something that seemed so far away. I was always focused on a goal, thinking that reaching it would make everything better. But now I see that it wasn't the goal that mattered. It was the journey, the lessons we learned, the way we became who we are because of it. The princess nodded, her eyes thoughtful. She had known all along in a way that the journey was never just about breaking the curse or achieving a specific outcome. It had always been about self-discovery, about recognizing one's true power and capacity for growth. She had never needed saving. What she needed was someone who could walk beside her, someone who would challenge her to step beyond her own limitations. "I understand what you mean," she said, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "The curse was only a part of the story. It wasn't the defining feature of my life. What mattered was the strength I discovered in myself, the way I learned to face the challenges in my own heart. I've always had the power to change my story, just as you have." Jamie looked at her, a surge of admiration filling his chest. It wasn't just her courage he admired now, it was her wisdom, her understanding of what had truly been at stake all along. The curse, the mountain, the trials, they had all been vehicles for something much deeper, self-realization and transformation. Together they continued walking in silence, allowing the tranquility of the night to settle over them. The mountain, once a towering symbol of their struggles, had now become a distant memory, a testament to what they had overcome. What lay ahead was unknown, but for the first time neither of them felt a sense of dread. There were no more obstacles to face, not from the mountain, not from the curse. The only challenge now was how to live the life they had won, how to make choices that reflected who they had become. As they descended further, the valley below them began to reveal the soft, silvery outline of the kingdom, now bathed in moonlight. The sight was beautiful, but what struck Jamie the most was not the grandeur of the land, but the sense of calm that settled over him. This was home, not just the land, but the life he was now building. He could feel it in his bones. The weight of the past had lifted, leaving only the potential of what lay ahead. And so, hand in hand, they walked together into the future. The journey had been long and it had been hard, but it had led them to this moment of peace. For Jamie, there was no greater reward than this, to walk forward with someone who truly understood him, someone who had shared in the struggles, the victories, and the quiet moments of reflection. The path ahead was theirs to carve, and in their hearts they knew that it was not the destination that mattered most, but the journey they would continue to share side by side. The deeper they walked into the valley, the more alive the world felt, as if the land itself was awakening from the long sleep of winter. The air was fresh with the scent of pine, and the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze carried with it a sense of quiet purpose. Every step Jamie took seemed to echo with the possibilities of the future. The mountain they had conquered, once a towering figure of challenge and uncertainty, now stood as a symbol of their resilience, a reminder of the strength they had found within themselves. As they walked, the princess beside him, Jamie felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey they had shared. It was not just the breaking of the curse or the freeing of the kingdom that mattered. It was the growth they had experienced, the way they had learned to embrace the unknown, to find strength in their vulnerabilities. What they had been through together had shaped them into something more than they were when they started. Their bond was forged in the fires of adversity, and now it was unbreakable. They came to a clearing where the moonlight seemed to pool on the earth, casting long silvery shadows. It was a beautiful sight, but it wasn't the scenery that took Jamie's breath away. It was the realization that everything in his life had led him to this point. He had always been searching for something, something to prove, something to conquer, something to overcome. But now he understood that what he had been searching for was not an external goal, but a sense of inner peace. The journey had been about discovering who he was, not just in the eyes of others, but in his own eyes. The princess stopped beside him, her gaze lifting to the sky, where the stars were beginning to appear one by one. "Look at that," she said softly, her voice carrying a note of wonder. "The stars are so far away, yet they feel so close. I used to feel so small beneath them, so lost in the vastness of everything. But now I see them differently. They're not just distant lights. They're a reminder that no matter how far away something seems, it's still within reach." Jamie looked up at the stars, his heart swelling with a mix of awe and understanding. The world was indeed vast, but in that moment, he realized that the vastness didn't have to feel overwhelming. It was filled with endless possibilities, endless opportunities for growth, and for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. The stars, the moon, the valley, all of it was a reminder that the journey was never about conquering the world outside. It was about conquering the world within. "Do you ever wonder," Jamie asked, his voice thoughtful, "how we got here? How we both ended up in this place at this moment?" The princess smiled, her eyes soft and knowing. "I think we were always meant to be here," she said, her words carrying a quiet confidence. "Maybe we didn't know it at the time, but this was always the path. Everything we went through, the curse, the trials, the struggles, it all led us here. We've always had the power to choose our own path, even when we didn't know it." Jamie nodded, a deep sense of peace settling over him. "And now we do. We have the power to choose what comes next." As they continued their journey through the valley, the world around them seemed to stretch on forever. The valley was filled with endless possibilities. There was no limit to what they could create, to the lives they could build, to the love they could share. The future, once uncertain and daunting, was now a canvas waiting to be painted with the colors of their dreams. The air grew colder as they walked, but the chill was no longer unwelcome. It was a reminder that the world was always in motion, always changing, always shifting. And with each change, there was an opportunity to grow, to adapt, to embrace the new chapters that life would bring. "We have everything we need," the princess said, her voice warm with conviction. "The rest is just a matter of choosing the next step." Jamie smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the temperature of the night air. The journey had taught him that everything he needed was already within him, that the courage, the strength, the love, and the wisdom were already there, waiting to be discovered. And now, with the princess beside him, he felt ready to step into the future, knowing that whatever came next, he would face it with an open heart and an unwavering belief in the power of possibility. Together they continued walking, the moon rising higher in the sky, casting a gentle glow on their path. The world ahead of them was unknown, but it no longer seemed daunting. It was full of promise, full of potential, and they were ready to embrace it together. As the night deepened, the world around them seemed to quieten, and yet, within that silence, Jamie and the princess felt more alive than ever before. The air had cooled significantly, but the crispness of the mountain night only served to deepen the sense of clarity in their minds. They walked side by side, the path ahead stretching out in front of them, bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight. It was a peaceful walk, not hurried or strained, but filled with a quiet sense of knowing. The journey had changed them both, but more importantly, it had allowed them to see themselves and each other in ways they never had before. The princess, now walking as an equal, no longer seemed like the figure of myth or the one bound by her curse. She was no longer defined by the chains that had once held her captive. She was free, not just of the curse, but of the limitations she had placed upon herself. And Jamie, once driven by a singular goal, had learned that the true reward was not in conquering obstacles or achieving a victory. It was in the way the journey had transformed him, how he had learned to see the world differently and to embrace the possibilities that lay before him. Their conversation faded, not because there was nothing left to say, but because words were no longer needed. There was a deep understanding between them, a connection that had been forged through shared experiences, challenges, and moments of silence. The world around them had been a constant companion, changing with every step they took. The mountain, which had once been a symbol of fear and uncertainty, was now just a memory, a reminder of their resilience and strength. They reached the bottom of the path, where the valley lay stretched out before them, bathed in the soft light of the moon. The distant city could be seen, its lights twinkling like stars, a symbol of a world that had moved on without them, but a world they were now ready to step back into. The past no longer felt heavy, and the future, once an uncertain path, now felt like a vast canvas waiting to be painted with their dreams. Jamie looked at the princess, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "We've made it," he said simply, but the weight of those words held all the meaning of the journey they had undertaken. The princess turned to him, her eyes sparkling with the same quiet joy. "No, Jamie," she replied softly, "we're just beginning." And as they stood there together at the edge of the valley with the stars above them and the future ahead, they knew that their true adventure had only just begun. The mountain had been only the first step in a journey of self-discovery and love, and together they would walk forward, side by side, into whatever came next. Their hearts were light, their minds clear, and with that, the night stretched out before them, peaceful and full of promise.